Hello to everyone who's watching this after the stream. As we wait for everyone who wants to join in to join in, have a very big announcement to make. I got a new mug. Look at it. Four quid at Wilco's because Wilco's is still open during this absolutely atrocious pandemic. And you know what? A girl's gotta treat herself sometimes. And so while I was doing my weekly grocery shop this Friday, I believe, Friday, probably more like Thursday. Can't remember at this point. But when I was doing my weekly grocery shop, I went to one of the shops that is farther away from me to Waitrose because I decided that I want to be bougie and I want to treat myself. And on the way back, I was passing past Wilco's, and I recently broke one of my plates. And so I was going to go in. I went into Wilco's with the firm decision that I was going to see if I can find the same plate that I have and buy myself a replacement. Instead of buying myself a replacement, one singular plate for the set that I have, I instead bought two new plates that I would really, really like and two new mugs. This is the favorite out of the two new mugs that I have. While the other one is just a plain mug that I decided that I should have because I got very frustrated over the past week running out of mugs at every conceivable moment. 6 mugs is not enough mugs. As I found out, it's kind of upsetting. Oh my good. Okay, give me like 30 seconds. My light's on in the bathroom. I'm gonna go turn that off really quickly. Okay, so today I decided to try something new, as you could tell probably by the fact that the thumbnail for this video is blue instead of its usual teal or turquoise. Not recently, so this has been a week and a half-ish going now, with my good friend Chris the Academic, Chris without a beard, and Chris who cannot cook, even though the other Chris has been downgraded from Chris who can cook to Chris who can somewhat cook, given a very entertaining foil in the microwave story that I was told. But anyway, so Chris and I decided that we're gonna work through a math textbook together because I haven't done math in like a year now, a very long time. And I really do love math, and I really do enjoy math. And as a result, we decided on this differential equations modeling, whatever. It's some textbook, and so I just worked through the first subsection of the first actual chapter of mathematics. Just before the stream, I put in 2 hours, took some beautiful notes. Goodbye to whoever just left. Hopefully I see you again. If not, I guess I won't. But really, what we're going to happen is that in a couple of past streams, I've definitely mentioned the fact that I have this beautiful, giant book called A History of the World in 100 Objects by Neil MacGregor. And it's all objects from the British Museum that are located in the British Museum right now. And I thought that I would read an essay on one of the objects today, just out loud, just so that everyone can enjoy this beautiful, wonderful essay on the Rhine mathematical papyrus. And, you know, if you want to tune it out, you can tune it out. But if you don't want to tune it out, I found it fascinating and very interesting. And it's just, you know, as a small preview of yet another book that you should probably read, and as a continuation of the theme of Sapiens and the whole entire history, and taking a second look at history and what we know of history and what we understand of it. And so everyone else, whenever you join in, you can join in. You can, I guess, if you have questions, put them in the chat. and I will answer them and we can discuss them after I finish this essay. And so, Rhind mathematical papyrus found at Thebes near Luxor, Egypt, made around 1550 BC. In 7 houses, there are 7 cats. Each cat catches 7 mice. If each mouse were to eat 7 ears of corn, and each ear of corn, if sown, were to produce 7 gallons of grain, how many things are mentioned in total? This is just one of dozens of similar problems, all equally complicated or all carefully written out, with the answers and showing the working in best schoolbook manner that are recorded in the Rhind mathematical papyrus. This object is the most famous mathematical papyrus to have survived from ancient Egypt and the major source of our understanding of how the Egyptians thought about numbers. The Rhind papyrus gives us no sense of maths as an abstract discipline through which the world can be conceived and contemplated anew, but it does let us glimpse and share the daily headaches of an Egyptian administrator. Like all civil servants, he seems to be looking anxiously over his shoulder at the National Audit Office, eager to ensure that he is getting value for money. So there are calculations about how many gallons of beer or how many loaves of bread you should be able to get from a given amount of grain, or how to calculate whether the beer or the bread that you're paying for has been adulterated. The whole Rhind papyrus contains 84 different problems, calculations that would have been used in different scenarios to solve the practical difficulties of administrative life. For instance, how to calculate the slope of a pyramid, or the amount of food necessary for different kinds of domesticated birds. It's mostly written in black, but red is used for each problem's title and solution. And interestingly, it is written not in hieroglyphics, but in a particular kind of scribbly administrative shorthand that is much quicker, much simpler to write. And here is a beautiful photo featured in the book. The papyrus owes its name to an Aberdeen lawyer, Alexander Rhind, who took to writing in Egypt in the 1850s because the dry heat helped his tuberculosis. There in Luxor, he bought this papyrus, which turned out to be the largest ancient mathematical text we know, not just from Egypt, but from anywhere in the ancient world. Because it is extremely sensitive to humidity and light, we keep it in the papyrus room of the British Museum. It is pretty dry and stuffy in there, and above all it's dark, all of which suits the papyrus, which rots in the damp and fades in bright light. It is the nearest we can get to Bloomsbury in conditions on an ancient Egyptian tomb, where the papyrus presumably spent most of its existence. The long papyrus would originally have been about 5 meters, 17 feet long, and would normally have been rolled up in a scroll. Today, it is in 3 pieces. The 2 largest ones are in the British Museum, framed under glass to protect them. The third is in Brooklyn Museum, New York. The papyrus is about 30 centimeters, roughly a foot high, and if you look closely, you can see the fibers of the papyrus plant. Making papyrus is a laborious but quite straightforward. The plant itself, a kind of reed which can grow about 4.5 meters, 15 feet high, was plentiful in the Nile Delta. The pith of the plant is sliced into strips, which are soaked and pressed together to form sheets, and the sheets are then dried and rubbed smooth with a stone. Conveniently, the organic fibers of papyrus mesh together without the need for glue. The result is a wonderful surface for writing on. Papyrus went on being used across the Mediterranean until about 1,000 years ago, and indeed gave most European languages their very word for paper. But papyrus was expensive. A 5-meter roll like the Rhind papyrus would have cost 2 copper deben, this about the same as a small goat. So this is an object for the well-off. Why would you spend so much money on a book of mathematical puzzles? I think because to own the scroll would have been a good career move. If you wanted to play any serious part in the Egyptian state, you had to be numerate. A society as complex as theirs needed people who could supervise building works, organize payments, manage food supplies, plan troop movements, commute compute the flood levels of the Nile, and much more. To be a scribe, a member of the civil service of the pharaoh, you had to demonstrate your mathematical competence. One contemporary writer put it, so that you may open treasuries and granaries, so that you may take delivery from one corn-bearing ship at the entrance to the granary, so that on feast days you may measure out the god's offering. The Rhind Papyrus teaches you all you need to know for a dazzling administrative career. It is effectively a primer for the Egyptian civil service exams around 1550 BC. Like self-help publications today that promise instant success, it has a wonderful title, written boldly in red on the front page. The correct method of reckoning for grasping the meaning of things and knowing everything, obscurities and all secrets. In other words, all the maths you need to know, buy me and you buy success. The numeracy of the Egyptians honed by works like the Rhind Papyrus was widely admired across the ancient world. Plato, for example, urged the Greeks to copy from the Egyptians, for whom the teachers, by applying the rules and practices of arithmetic to play, prepare their pupils for the tasks of marshalling and leading armies and organizing military expeditions, and altogether form them into persons more useful to themselves and to others and a great deal wider awake. But if everybody agreed that training like this produced a formidable state machine, the question of what mathematics the Greeks actually did learn from the Egyptians remained a matter of debate. The problem is that we only have a very few surviving Egyptian mathematical documents. Many others must have perished. And so though we have to assume that there was a flourishing higher mathematics, we just do not have the evidence for it. Professor Clive Ricks of the University of Leicester emphasizes the significance of the Rhind Papyrus. The traditional views have always been that the Greeks learned geometry from the Egyptians. Greek writers such as Herodotus, Plato, and Aristotle all refer to the outstanding skills of the Egyptians in geometry. If we didn't have the Rhind mathematical papyrus, we'd actually know very little about how the Egyptians did mathematics. The algebra is entirely what we would call linear algebra, straight line equations. There are some of what we call arithmetical progressions, which are a little bit more sophisticated. The geometry is a very basic kind as well. And Homsi, the original copyist of the papyrus, tells us how to calculate the area of a circle and how to calculate the area of a triangle. There is nothing in this papyrus that would trouble your average GCSE student, and most is rather less advanced than that. But this is, of course, what you'd expect, because the person using the Rhind mathematical papyrus is not training to be a mathematician. He just needs to know enough to handle tricky practical problems, like how to divide up rations among workmen. If, for instance, you have 10 gallons of animal fat to get you through the year, how much can you consume every day? By dividing 10 by 365 was tricky then, as it is now, but it's essential if you were going to keep a workforce properly supplied and energized. Eleanor Robson, a specialist in ancient mathematics from Cambridge University, explains, everyone who was writing mathematics was doing it because they were learning how to be a literate manager, bureaucrat, a scribe. They were learning both the technical skills and how to manage numbers and weights and measures in order to help places and temples manage their large economies. There must have been a whole lot of discussion of mathematics and how to solve the problems of managing huge building projects like the pyramids and the temples, and managing the huge workforces that went with it and feeding them all. How that more sophisticated discussion of mathematics was conducted or transmitted, we can only guess. The evidence that has come down to us is maddeningly fragmentary, because the papyrus is so fragile that it tends to crumble, it rots in damp conditions, and burns so easily. We don't even know where the Rhind papyrus came from, but we presume that it must have been a tomb. There are some examples of private libraries being buried with their owners, presumably to establish their educational and administrative credentials in the afterlife. This loss of evidence makes it very hard to form a view of how Egypt stood in comparison to its neighbors, and to understand exactly how representative Egyptian mathematics is around 1550 BC. Eleanor Robson tells us the only evidence from the same time we've got to compare it with is from Babylonia in southern Iraq, because they were the only two civilizations at that point that actually used writing. I'm sure that lots of other cultures were counting and managing with numbers, but they all did it, as far as we know, without ever writing things down. The Babylonians we know a lot more about because they wrote on clay tablets, and unlike papyrus, clay survives very well in the ground over thousands of years. So Egyptian mathematics, we have perhaps 6, maximum 10 pieces of writing about mathematics, and the biggest, of course, is the Rhind papyrus. For me, the most remarkable thing about this papyrus is how close it lets us get to the quirky details of daily life under pharaohs, not least the culinary aspects. From it, we learn that if you force feed a goose, it needs 5 times as much grain as a free-range goose will eat. So did the Egyptians eat foie gras? Ancient Egypt also seems to have had a battery farming, because we're told that geese kept in a coop, presumably unable to move, will need only a quarter of the food consumed by their free-range counterparts, and so would be much cheaper to fatten up for the market. In between the beer and the bread and the hypothetical foie gras, you can see that the logistical infrastructure of an enduring and powerful state able to mobilize vast human and economic resources for public works and military campaigns. Egypt of the pharaohs was, to its contemporary, a land of superlatives, astonishing visitors from all over the Middle East by the colossal scale of its buildings and sculptures, as it still does today. Like all successful states, as now, it needed people who could do the maths. And if you're puzzling over the cats and the mice and the ears of grain in the puzzle that I begin with, the answer is 19,607. So that was the wonderful, wonderful essay by Neil McGregor about the Rhind mathematical papyrus that is currently being displayed, hopefully still currently being displayed, in the British Museum, in this wonderful book, History of the World in 100 Objects. And I read this essay about 3 hours ago in preparation, because I was trying to decide on if I was going to keep on rambling about everything for an hour straight, or do I actually want to have a topic to discuss. And so it turns out I do actually want to have a topic to discuss. And so while I take a really quick break from talking, I will check if anyone else needs the link to my wonderful live stream, and if anyone else wants to participate in this. But opinions in the live chat, if you wish. If you don't wish to put them in the live chat, if you're watching this after, I'd love to hear your opinions down in the comments. But one of the things that struck me the most is the fact that so many people Chris the academic, with whom I was doing math earlier in the day with, said that he wasn't listening closely enough to say anything intelligent, which I had a very sexist comment actually for that, but that I will refrain from saying on recorded camera, so that if for future employers ever find this, they take it. But thankfully, Chris does in fact read minds, and more importantly, knows me well enough to say exactly what I was gonna say, which is, so like a regular discussion class. In case I was missing docs, I was in fact missing. So right now, I was gonna say more accurately, like most men in discussion classes, but that's what I was gonna say. But see, thank you. It is in fact fair. When was the last time Actually, I'm not gonna say what was the last time, but I can tell you that there has been many a seminar this term ruined, actually this term and last term, absolutely ruined by one man not listening, not paying attention in class, and having putting everyone off topic for 20 minutes to have the professor explain to him a rudimentary concept that we went over at the beginning of the class and like the very beginning in lecture. But it's fine, I guess. There are no stupid questions in class. But right, and so the important thing to me, I think, is the fact that the biggest takeaway for me is the fact that as much as people don't like math, as I've met maybe like a handful of people who share my absolute devotion and love of all things numerical, mathematical, complex in that way. Everything that can be enumerated well, clearly, and universally. So, for example, like mathematics, the ancient Egyptians practiced math some 3,500 years ago, and their area and their way of calculating the area, they still would get the same area if we gave them the same triangle. Wow, every time. So the more I do these live streams, the more I realize that I can't actually talk and I don't actually know English. That being said, they also worked on their GCSEs also included having to calculate the area of a triangle, the area of a circle, so on and so forth, which I find extremely entertaining. And actually, I find very very heartening in some aspects, because if some 22-year-old studying to upper his social standing, trying to figure out that trying to earn his family more money, trying to provide for a more comfortable existence, had to learn how to calculate the area of a triangle, then I feel a little less bad realizing that I don't remember any of my trigonometric identities today while I was doing mathematics. It's fine. It's not fine, actually. It's very much so not fine. The biggest annoyance in my life is the fact that, actually in most people's lives, I would imagine, is the fact that once you learn something, you need to like continue doing it, or else you'll unlearn it entirely. Besides the things that are recorded in your muscle memory. So surprisingly enough, I can still write out the proper formulas for most things, but will I ever be able to recall them? No. Which is okay, I guess. It's fine. But off topic, that was me getting a little more off topic, but really, and I think it's fascinating to remember when people cite to me that the Grecians invented most modern mathematics, and that Europe is a pioneer in the hard sciences. Things like this essay. Oh, that's actually all right. So Chris just said in the chat that you learn things so that when you need the knowledge, you can relearn it quicker. And I actually really like that. I'm not necessarily learning to like know in the end, but for me to be right. Okay, but then that actually makes me feel a lot better, because I've definitely learned about a lot of things in my undergrad, and I can't recall most things about the comparative revolutions class I took a freshman year. Fall. Spring. So definitely can't remember most things talked about in the comparative revolutions class I took. 3 years ago now. But can I recall the textbooks that I use so that when I need to talk about revolutions, I can really quickly pull out all the references and skim them through and recall most things that were discussed and recall the important factors? Yes, I could, as I found out recently when I was writing a paper, which is exciting. Also, if anyone wants to know, the paper that I wrote, the paper that was due on Tuesday, the one that I talked about last stream, went really, really well. I'm really proud of myself. If I wrote on, I'm sure I mentioned this last time as well, but I wrote on the Iranian hostage crisis and how it was a bloody miracle that no one died. None of the hostages died. Turns out 8 people from the U.S. military died due to the crisis because 8 people died during a botched rescue attempt done by the U.S. military, which such a big surprise. I am so surprised. The U.S. not taking into account for the fact that people's weather is different. Curious. Anyway, I'm just being salty at this point. It's just but it's I think it went well. I had more things. I got to 4,200 words, which, if you know me, my biggest difficulty is getting to the word limit. More often than not, I drop out. I stop function. My brain just gives up approximately 10 to 15% from the word limit. So I expected myself to kind of be done writing at 3,500 words. I still could have put in 3 more paragraphs in there discussing other aspects of this whole entire mess, which was very good. It made me feel a lot better. And so now when I have my next essay due, not this upcoming Tuesday, but next Tuesday, but 2 Tuesdays from now, the 5th, I feel like I can write a 5,000 word essay in a couple of days. Which is probably what it's going to end up happening because I still don't have a topic. So if you have any interesting ideas about international criminal law that you would like to learn about, put it in the chat, put it in the comments, because I would happily write an essay or be given a topic for an essay, because I can't be bothered to research it enough right now, and I don't know what's interesting to me. So if you have something that's interesting and you want to learn about next stream, please let me know. I will happily learn it for you so that I can give you the lowdown in 15 minutes or less. Or, I'll end up talking about it for an hour straight. Also, another question to pose to my wonderful listeners. I was thinking that an hour is a very, very long time. That being said, as we know, I can talk for an hour, but analytics, the lovely YouTube analytics that I receive every time I do a stream, have shown that the average watching time is approximately 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, people tend to drop off because, again, I understand I'm not that interesting. As much as fascinating me and my opinions are, I agree that an hour is kind of a long time to listen to me drone on and on about my own personal issues and personal problems and whatever it is I'm droning on about. And so would it be more accessible? Would people prefer it if I do 2 streams instead of 1 on Sunday and do 2 30-minute ones, 1 on Wednesday, 1 on Sunday at the same time at 5 p.m. And do 30-minute ones instead of an hour-long ones. That way I can also have more concise topics to talk about each stream, as it will probably make it a little easier to both follow and to be engaged. Chris Wong would preferably 1. Zoe, I don't know what your absolutely means. But that's fair. But I will also ask around to whoever actually listens to these. But right, and so going back two would be more focused. Yeah, right. Two would be a whole lot more focused, and I feel like those are more interesting to watch again. Angie would prefer one. Hi, welcome. I think this is your first comment in the live chat. Welcome. Hello. I'm really glad you're watching. I know you told me that you're watching these, but like, thank you. Okay, prefer one. All right. Well, that's fair and valid. We shall see. But okay, so really on the topic of, I know you said that, but like, right, I never know, because I don't have a list of people who can see who's like actually watching. I never know who are the 5, 7, 8, whatever, however many people show up for each individual stream. I don't ever know how many people who are the people who are watching. So I just kind of like guess. But thank you for watching. I thank you, more accurately, thank you for watching, and thank you for putting it in the chat that you are actually there, because I don't know who's watching unless you say hello to me in the chat. So I don't know. This is say hello to me, chat. Say hello to me in the chat once in a while. It would, remind me. I can, like, I don't know, share stories that you actually enjoy. But I was talking about something. What was I talking about? I was talking about this essay, right? And so this essay, and so, and how most of math, most of science is very much so about the famous schools from Athens, and in general, and Greece in general, and how a lot of our geometry, and our classical understanding of geometry. I'm not talking about like fancy non-Euclidean geometry. I'm very much so talking about the geometry you were taught in school. It comes from Euclid's Elements, which is a compilation of proofs done by Euclid, a reasonably famous Grecian mathematician. Similarly, the Pythagorean theorem also comes supposedly from Pythagoras, a also reasonably famous Grecian mathematician. But it is important to point out that firstly, both of these people are very likely not to have actually found out these properties and done these proofs themselves. Pythagoras, most importantly, Pythagoras actually opened up a school for mathematics. And it's very likely that Pythagoras himself didn't actually figure out this relationship, the a squared plus b squared equals c squared relationship on a right triangle. But it was one of his students, which, interestingly enough, most of the research done by professors is actually done by their research assistants. So, fun fact. Times haven't changed all that much, but and so for most of history, we have slapped the most convenient name onto whatever we discovered. Did it go just really dark? Can we adjust this? Can this would you stop it? There we go. Okay. Chris Wong very helpfully puts in the chat, to be fair, professors don't throw their assistants off a boat for asking about irrational numbers. Right, and so thankfully they don't do that anymore. These research assistants go to other professors who are like, we should look at that, and then the other professor gets cred for discovering something new. But more importantly, right, it just that anecdote immediately points to the fact that a lot of history, and a lot of, again, hard mathematical history, more importantly scientific history in general, isn't any means complete. And not only is it no means complete, we put on the discovery of things, of anything, for, again, Pythagoras, the Pythagorean theorem. Um, and oh, I don't know what. Chris, could you give me some more named mathematical phenomena that most people would know? Because I cannot remember any for the life of me right now. But it's important, right? But so this mathematical phenomena, invention of, I would people know Euler's triangle? Does anyone besides Chris and I know what Euler's triangle is? If you do, and if you're watching this afterwards, comments, please, because I would love to. I would. Right, okay. You know, because you've also studied math, so you don't count. Um, I've seen the linear algebra formulas on your pinned up above your desk. Like, you don't. Of course, you'd know. This reminds me of the time where I tried to brute force Euler's brick. What about Newton? Right. Okay. So I don't know, but I'm pretty sure most of Newton's discoveries actually came from two separate scientists, two other people, actively doing research, and Newton just communicated with them and got it a publication a lot faster than the other two did. And I cannot remember their names for the life of me, and I believe they were Germans. But more importantly, those two Germans based a lot of their work on he did not independently discover it. They both, everyone, like, no one independently. Right, great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris Wing, for providing me the name of the German, I believe, who independently discovered calculus. But they both based their work on work done by a Persian mathematician in very much that was done much so a Persian mathematician whose work was done much earlier than Newton and Gottfried. But right, and so it further highlights the full out erasure of any and all non-European discoveries of mathematical and scientific phenomena. For example, the numerical system that we use today are Arabian numerals. They were discovered, or they were used. Specifically in. They were put under common usage in India. Fun fact, actually, that's where they were first implemented as like the standard. But they were invented again by Persian mathematicians trying to figure out a lot of other stuff. But when you ask people in general, there's actually I will hopefully find this study, but I read about the study being done. There was a survey done of the American populace. That being said, please take this with a pinch of salt, because this is in fact the American populace that was surveyed. Though, given the recent fun fact that I found out that 55% of the British public believes that global warming is over exaggerated or a hoax, I can't imagine that the British public would be any better at this, but approximately 50% of people, when asked the question, should we teach the Arabic numeral system in schools, answered categorically no, which, is the mathematical system we use right now, and the numbers that we use right now. Actually, I also learned this very interestingly, the Arabic numeral system came about is fascinating, because it talked about it. The way it's written is the number of angles. I think. Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. That is very, very valid, but also that seems reasonable. I also will there are always right. Okay, thank you. Thank you for bringing this up, Chris. Everything that I do read, in fact, I do not double check everything that I read. That being said, it is very important that if you ever read a piece of sensationalist media, to remember that a media will in fact reword everything to make it more aligned with your views, to make sure that you actually read it, and b always check. Statistics means nothing. You can claim anything in statistics and back it up with some statistic ever. And so, it could have been a survey done God knows where, and with a very targeted population, which isn't actually representative of the United States as a whole. And you should always, in fact, question methodology, how the questions are phrased, and really you should always question everything at this point because you really should not trust the media. And because the media's one singular goal at this point is not to make you an informed consumer, but to sell you things. Continuing on. Fun fact. So the Arabic numeral system was created in the way that it measured the amount of angles located within the geometric number. And so if you write out, okay, Chris, who works or who's gonna work, who actually has a job lined up after we graduate, which is phenomenal and fantastic, and I'm insanely jealous, because my hopeless ass has not even got started on looking for a job, even though we're in the middle of the pandemic, which means that all the jobs after this pandemic is finished will also be up for grab. We'll have everyone else also vying for them, and furthermore, a lot of people are graduating at this point. It's fine. So he commented that Simon Singh does a very interesting talk on how the media arrange stats to work in their favor. And that, okay, so stats don't actually, right, but there's saying that the stats actually bend the truth, not so much as the stats don't work. And they just disregard everything that doesn't actively support what you want to say, which is very easy to do. And I know that I have done it in a number of academic papers, not specifically at stats, but when you read a paper and the paper actually says, this is the theory, but the theory doesn't work, but you're like, but this is the theory, and the theory seemingly works for this one thing. Disregarding completely the fact that it was disproved for a specific case. So it's fine. It could still be applicable actually to your new case, but it is what it is. What was I talking about? I was talking about it was he apparently also has a book, The Art of Statistics, and I'm clearly going to be reading that super soon. But I was talking about names, numerology, the fact that Arabic numerals, and the fact that it's right. So if you write out the numbers, and so one is supposed to be written out. Right. If you're curious about this, let me know. I will tell you and share with you the infographic that shows you where all the angles are, so that you can count them yourself. But it's very fascinating the way the numerals were actually created. But moving on is the fact that we continuously, and I mean continuously, ignore the fact that most European inventions are not actually European inventions. Europeans just very effectively published it, put their name on it, and actually had a concept of intellectual property much earlier than anyone else, or much more ingrained in society than anyone else. Where in other places it was shared knowledge, common knowledge. In Europe, it's very much so, I discovered this, therefore it's mine and my knowledge, so you have to be referencing me by name every time you use it. Which works in some cases, doesn't work in other cases. Good or bad, I can't be the judge of that, but take it as you will. And so I implore you at any given moment to remember that for every, Newton, Euler, Pythagoras, right? There's probably a collection of other people who have discovered it before him, who were just conveniently erased from the history books because they were female, because they didn't align with whatever propaganda, whatever image that Europe was aiming to spread. For an extended period of time, Turkey was considered to be part of Europe, and then suddenly it wasn't. For a period of time, Greece wasn't considered to be European enough either. And Grecian history, and the fact that most of Roman everything came from Greece. Besides the emperor and that whole system, administrative system, but it's something. It's definitely something to consider. It's definitely something to consider that even now in politics, which politics has always been very much so a male-dominated field, even now in politics, in most discussions that are not revolve about feminism in politics, we read near exclusively male authors. Any discussions of traditional practices of politics, so for me in international relations, realism, is again mostly male authors, which is not necessarily, again, a good or bad thing, but it's a very limiting thing. And it, again, forgets the fact that my professor of international relations at my old university, at my old school, was in fact a woman educated in the 70s, and very much so a staunch liberal, not liberal, God, very much so a staunch conservative, and like a Reaganist, and firmly believes in that. And she showed us photographs of her attending a Department of Defense symposium on whatever, and it's all men and her. Which, again, I don't particularly expect the system to change dramatically in 20 years, 30 years, however long it's been since that photo was taken. But also, we are products of the history that we're taught. We Americans believe, like, American nationalism, right, comes from the fact that we are taught about America as a state, as a country. Again, European, same thing. English versus European nationalism. England has such individualistic approaches because it is taught in an individualistic. The entirety of the country is taught your English history rather than European history in a very individualistic sense. That these were the right things to do, and we did them as a country, and our part of our identities within the community is based on the way the history of the community is taught to us. And it's always been an important thing, as history in general has always been a very important thing. For example, the Aboriginal peoples in Australia have one of the most accurate spoken histories um, of anyone in the world, and they have spoken, taught, passed down histories and stories of the massive marsupials and the massive animals that lived on Australia before, humans ate them all and killed and ate them all. When in fact they colonized. And I use colonized in the very traditional sense when humans colonized Australia. And so, and history and our perception of history really helps us. It's part of our identity. It's part of our understanding of who we are and how we fit into society, and how we fit into this linear progression of time that we perceive. And as a result, that's why most textbooks are government regulated, and that's why almost all curriculums are government regulated, of what you have to learn and why is it, and justification of what you have to discuss and what the students have to know. And that's not just about rudimentary language and mathematical skills, so that you know how to communicate and you know how to be a functional member of society. It's also about history and what literature you have to have read, and all of that ties into what gives us an identity as part of this culture. And so, tying this back to the essay that I read at the very beginning, and to the papyrus, right? Documents like that and understandings of things like that those mathematical things are still very much so in context. The fact that we have documents upon documents about books upon servers chock full of absolutely theoretical mathematical data is a very clear sign of how we as a culture, as a global universal culture, pride ourselves on being logical, on being rational, on being able to formulate these complex theoretical aspects of the universe, of the world, as we perceive them, and really is a symbol, a monument to how much we prize our ability, not only our ability to do that, but how much we prize and value our ability to calculate and our ability to be logical in another person, which apparently hasn't changed all that much, right? And really, not even that it hasn't changed all that much, is that it is this fully descended from this papyrus actually shows us. It's descended across, not only across time, but across cultures and rise and fall of glorious, ginormous empires and powerful ones as well. And we still continue to prize this ability to do maths at the very basic, to calculate this. But we've evolved from being able to only do, or from prizing above all, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? The applicable. We have gone from prizing above all the applicable, the day-to-day mathematics, and the day-to-day exist and the realities that we can observe in our day-to-day existence, to prizing things that we can no longer observe and can no longer actually experience in our day-to-day lives. And as again, right, will I ever need to know the acceleration of a moving particle? Probably not. Will I ever be able to see and to be able to perceive the acceleration of a moving particle? Unless we're talking about gravity, probably not. And even then, right, unless you're working on a very, very big scale where you see something dropping from a very, very high height, you're also not going to notice you're not truly going to notice the effects of gravity because the time period in which it works is so small. And so, yeah, and I guess that is my, in fact, talk for the day. Biggest takeaways from everything that I said over these past 55 minutes is the fact that A, I got a new mug. B, question everything, question every little thing, because A, the media lies to you, also your history books are lying to you, and your government lies to you as well. Now, they don't necessarily have your worst interest at heart. They're just trying to make do with what they've got. It's very difficult to build a collective, a society, if there isn't something that we share. I got the mug from Wilko's. It's £4, and Wilko's is open during quarantine. I highly suggest you go check it out, Anja, because they have actually a number of really cute mugs. I also got some really cute plates there. So if you want to treat yourself, Wilko's in town. Super great. But yeah, so question the things you know. And just because it said that somebody discovered it, maybe, but it's also very likely that someone else discovered it as well and just didn't care enough to write it down and make it very popular, which leads me to my final point that I just get surmised from everything that I've talked about, is that really what the Europeans was excellent marketers. They explicitly went, you know what, we need to sell it. They very efficiently sold all of their ideas to everyone across the world. Now, be it under threat of a gun or, in trade for food or whatever else, but the Europeans were very efficiently marketed their skill set and their beliefs to everyone in the world, which is why we are all, at this point, still educated in a very traditional European manner and judge ourselves against European standards of beauty, understanding of the world order, and so on and so forth. Even humanism, the whole concept of human rights, is very much so a European concept of human rights, derived from the fact that Europe was not Europe really, but Europe was the original holders of Christianity, and from Christian. So humanism and humanist beliefs about people come from Christian ideals about people. So, question what you know is what I have to say. I have now 1 minute left. I wish everyone to stay safe, safe and sound. Hopefully this was an interesting talk. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you didn't, you can tell me, I guess. But please be constructive. Like, tell me exactly what you didn't enjoy. If you did enjoy it, I'm so glad. Maybe I'll do another. If you want, I can do another one of these maybe in a couple of weeks, because I'd rather not just read from one book for 2 weeks straight. But stay safe. Make sure that you're, practicing self-care, self-love. If you want to stay in bed all day, I don't recommend it. But, sometimes you can stay in bed all day. It's quarantine. Like, what are you gonna do? And yeah, I guess. And now it's 6 p.m. and I will leave you all to it. Have a lovely evening. Have the lovely rest of the week. If you have any suggestions, again, let me know.